Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone that is already here to this month's webinar. We are doing You Have Benefits at Work. Now what? Quick disclaimer for everyone. Yes, as usual, this is an educational seminar. Nothing we say should be considered advice. We're going to cover a lot of topics, and I'm sure there are professionals in those topics. Always seek a licensed professional's help, basically, long and short of it. But we're happy to provide information for all of you. We're also going to do some quick housekeeping matters. In general, the first one we see is clear the calculator. And what we mean by that is, there are a lot of distractions that go on in our world. And just like a calculator, you have to clear all the previous input to make your new calculations make sense. We hope that you all do that. Clear your distractions. If you can, actually take your lunch break and turn off your cell phone, or at least silence it for a while, so that we can deep dive and get involved with all of this. Also, there's some really great things. We can submit questions, which I'll show you in a slide as well, through Slido, as you see there, www.sli.do, Slido. The event code is benefits. Additionally, so that you all know this, you're going to be offered a complimentary consultation at the end of this webinar. In addition, there's a lot of great stuff in here, and there's a toolkit that we can send you. So if you would like this toolkit, which you will hear more about as we get into this, just email Amber at ricefg.com and put toolkit in there, and we'll make sure to get you what you need. So yes, again, questions, as you see on this slide, it's really important to understand that we have this opportunity under Slido to answer questions, and I hope you guys have them. I see people are on here, so I hope you put in any questions you have about your benefits. I think this is really important too, because here we are coming up on open enrollment season, so we want to make sure that we get your questions answered in a timely manner. So slido.com or sli.do. Now, let me introduce our speaker. I'm really excited to be introducing Brian Wilson. Look at that handsome guy right there. He's a Midwestern born, I believe from Iowa, and then went to Nebraska, go Cornhuskers. And he has been in Portland since 2014. I actually met him in 2015. He is a friend and coworker, and I value his input on a lot of things. And I really think that you guys are going to be excited to hear from him. A little bit more about him personally. He has 5 daughters, yes, 5 girls, as well as 1 granddaughter. He's been working with families and businesses in the financial space since 2003. He personally has had over 1,500 individual clients in 24 states, and over 200 plus businesses have offered his services through them. So he is a fiduciary. That's a common question we get. Has a commitment to serving his clients, and that really is genuine. I don't know many people that care about their clients more than Brian does. He is genuine through and through. And with that, and I hope a glowing recommendation here, I would like to introduce Brian Wilson.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate the kind words, and thank you to all of you who've joined our presentation today. So as Nate mentioned, I've done this for a while. I had a previous career prior to doing the work that I'm doing now, where I worked with lots and lots of businesses, lots and lots of families. I was actually involved in kind of a voluntary benefits role. So having the opportunity to visit with you all today around benefits is something that is near and dear to my heart. And thank you for taking the time. Also, my name is Brian Wilson. It's interesting because I've done a lot of these presentations over 18 years of working with clients at 200 plus businesses. I've had a lot of presentations, and depending upon the age of the client that I meet with, when they hear Brian Wilson, I get different responses. So for example, there was a time when the San Francisco Giants were playing in the World Series, and there was the big black beard pitcher, Brian Wilson. I've also got the lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did. And I also get the Beach Boys singer. Again, hey, Brian Wilson like the Beach Boys. So then often when I would get in this position of presenting and was going to be brought up on stage or going to present and doing something to break the ice, often I would get the Beach Boys singer. So people would think, well, what's he going to do to break the ice? You'd think sing. But I actually put together a little rap for today, and it goes something like this. Thank you for coming to this benefits meeting. Now, just because I'm rapping, take a deep breath, keep on breathing. It's better to be engaged than just sitting in your chair. I mean, I could ask a question and just get a blank stare, but I know you'll be so friendly and oh so nice because, I mean, shoot, I wrote a little rap to break the ice. And we're all friends and learning is cool. And everybody knows the benefits rule. And I know that's kind of just a little goofy rap, but there's a couple reasons why I do it. The first one is just to bring the human element of what we're doing here today. And the fact that I know that you join this call today and you're doing the best you can. People in general are. This is a safe space to ask questions. This is a space where we're going to provide educational opportunities. So we just want to make it that we take what we do seriously, but we don't want to take ourselves too seriously. The other one's kind of a little nod to my dad, and he always tried to make people smile. So, hey, if I could accomplish that, job well done. So nod to you there, Dad. But we're going to jump in today and we're going to be talking about benefits and how do we navigate the choices that we make. And it's interesting because, like I mentioned before, in order for you to be successful in the work that you do requires a certain amount of time, energy, and effort. And when you're not doing that, then often you're spending time with those you care about, friends, family, loved ones. Beyond that, then maybe you're doing self-care, grabbing a beer, watching a game, going to the gym. And then you sit down and get the benefits booklet at work. And how do we make decisions and what do we do? And this is something that we're in positions to make choices about. But what I'd like to do today is kind of do three things. First, I'd like to start off with some historical context of where we've been related to benefits. Then secondly, I want to go through kind of 5 mistakes we see people making when it comes to benefits. And then lastly, we're going to have some questions and things to ask with your benefits team, financial, insurance, legal professionals, et cetera. So let's jump in. Beginning with some context, if we just look at where we've been related to benefits, it started back in 1875, really, when the first private pension was established, in an effort really to create a stable, career-oriented workforce. And a fun little fact of the first private company to open a pension, was the American Express Company. So little fun fact for later today. But it's interesting because you just think about, like, historically in 1900, the life expectancy is approximately 49 years of age at birth. So if someone who reached, say, the age of 60, they may expect to live maybe an average of an additional 12 years in general. So people are just working. This concept of like retirement isn't really what it was today, right? The idea of stopping working and spending these years alive, not working, just was not necessarily part of the conversation. In 1935, the government comes on the scene and Social Security is enacted. At that point, they established 65 as the normal retirement age, as the establishment of Social Security established that age. But it's interesting, if you think about life expectancy back then, in 1935, it was about 60 years of age at birth. So it's interesting, if you think about it, the time of enactment, it's believed that most workers will not live for really an extended period of time after retirement, and thus Social Security benefits were really going to be for a minimal amount of time. In 1942, the Wage and the Salary Act freezes wages in an attempt to contain wartime inflation. And then in 1943, the War Labor Board ruled that the wage freeze did not apply to fringe benefits. So it encouraged employers to offer pensions and health and welfare benefits as an alternative means to attract workers. So really, again, just the time frame that we've been having these conversations around these things is important to think through and understand. Also, just from a mindset standpoint, in 1945, there's about 75% of the American public who are paying income taxes, which is far different from today. I'd encourage you to see our tax webinar around that. But so as a general population, this whole idea of deferral was popular, to defer pension income. In 1956, the IRS passed the regulation 1401-1, where it established kind of the parameters for a pension. And so it's interesting, if you look at that, a pension was established by an employer primarily to provide systematically for a payment of definitively determinable benefits to employees over a period of years, usually for life after retirement. So as you think about that, and you think about the mentality where people had, hey, you go to work for some company, you get the gold watch, you retire, it's all taken care of, right off into the sunset. This is where some of that kind of background mentality came from. 1974, ERISA came, and there was a lot that came along with that. But then something monumental happened in 1978, and it still is impacting the decisions today. Anyone want to guess what that is? Well, it was the Beach Boys super hits of 1978, as seen on TV. I mean, this is a Capitol era compilation of 18 songs on a single LP released through the TV mail order label Ronco. Tons of big hits. Obviously not that. But again, just trying to see how well you're all paying attention. What it was is in 1978, it was the establishment of the Revenue Act of 1978, which was the passage of the qualified deferred comp plans, or 401k plans. What it did is it allowed, pre-tax employees to contribute to plans. But what happened more importantly was really a shift in responsibility, because it was the beginning of a shift from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. And this shift cannot be underestimated, especially considering longevity, life expectancy today. We'll kind of get into it more and unpack this, but here's a visual representation of that shift. It is dramatic. And one of the tricky things though here is that they're both still called a pension, but a defined benefit and a defined contribution are hugely, hugely different. And we'll get into that. Pausing for a moment here, if I were to ask you, what is the objective of climbing a mountain? Many people would say, get to the top, enjoy the process, etc. And while all that is true, we want to get down, we want to get to the top, but then we also need to get down safely. And if we need ropes to get down the mountain, when's the best time to pack them, right? And let's assume that you're planning on climbing up the hill climbing up the mountain and then down the mountain with, let's say, a guide or a Sherpa that would just make sure that you got down safely. Well, that mentality of having someone else do it for you, the gold watch, the guide, the defined benefit pension plan that'll get you safely down the mountain and through retirement, that all changed in 1978. And the burden of getting you down the mountain changed, and it became your responsibility as opposed to someone else taking care of it for you. So again, we'll unpack that as we continue, but it cannot be underestimated. So regardless of your benefit situation though, big picture, there's going to be 3 phases of wealth that you will journey through, and then 3 sets of rules related to those different phases. We all start out at a 100% people at work. There's no assets, and we're in the accumulation phase. During the accumulation phase, people are striving towards their maximum financial potential. They're trying to build wealth efficiently, be strategic with taxes, reduce or eliminate risks, enjoy the journey, while at the same time setting up that distribution phase, or kind of the back end of things, whereby we strive to then be able to spend and enjoy our wealth with a sense of comfort, without fear. We would like to have maximum income. But there's also risks that we have to mitigate at that point, being mindful that there will come a time too where we pass and the preservation phase and money goes from one generation to the next. And the questions there are, who's going to get it, when, and how much. So as we look at benefits, and let's say you're sitting down and this is a picture of you and this is you at your table and you're trying to decide what to do. Over your lifetime, you have made a lot of financial decisions. The challenge is the manner in which you've made those can present a challenge, because just like if you set to the benefits, you say, what do I do with benefits? You've also done that with a banker, with a tax advisor, with a business partner, with an auto and home insurance agent. We've made decisions one at a time, at different times, with different people, under different circumstances. And in that, it just makes it hard to keep up with things and keep it organized. We often develop what's called a financial junk drawer, where things are just kind of hard to manage. It's not efficient. And And it's interesting too, because often we've built this team of financial professionals to help navigate through these choices. But when we also go and talk to those financial professionals, or if we're really going to talk to anyone in the financial space, one of the questions I would encourage you to ask is where are they getting their education from? Because often it's coming from financial institutions. And it's not to say that they're bad. It's just that oftentimes that benefits person who's coming in has got their education from a certain financial institution. Again, good people. But we have to just recognize that often these financial institutions operate under the following 4 rules, in that they want your money, they want it consistently over time, they want to hold on to it for as long as possible, and then give it back little by little. So many times then there are these products or strategies that support that. Again, it doesn't make them bad. We just want to take a step back and try and get some awareness of what's going on with the choices you're making with your hard-earned money, your time, your treasures, your talent, because ultimately there's going to be 3 parties that are kind of competing for the dollars that you work hard for. One competition is going to be the IRS and money going to taxes over time, that throughout your whole lifetime and then through the preservation and passing money to the next generation, we want to be mindful of how are we, what taxes we're paying, strategies around that. Secondly, we're going to have money going to financial institutions, be it mortgage companies, savings, insurance companies. And then also there's going to be a portion that you just want to spend and enjoy for living life and your daily and living expenses. So we just want to be mindful of what all is happening. And as we bring it back to benefits today, because ultimately any decision you make, like if you look at a still pond and you chuck a rock in there, there's a splash initially, but then there's these ripples that come from those decisions. And so often at the benefits choices that we make, we see the splash, but we may not be aware of those ripples. And so hopefully today we can help unpack that for you. Ultimately, again, as mentioned, you're doing the best you can. Oftentimes the way that we've made these decisions historically has been from people we've met, sacrifice we've made, what we've believed, who we've talked to. They're not always logical. Sometimes it's the ruts and the guardrails that we've built in our own mind. Move this back here. All right. So that being said, let's dive in and start to go through some of the mistakes that we see well-intentioned good people making when it comes to benefits. So number 1, we're going to talk about perception and understanding, or rather oftentimes misunderstanding. We'll talk about product versus strategy planning. We'll talk about leaving money on the table, incorrect forms, and then context or lack of context. So diving in. The first one that we see oftentimes is just this whole perception and misunderstanding, in that there are things that we know, there's things that we don't know, and then there's things that we don't know. And the concerns here are not knowing or understanding important concepts of information, like, oh, we didn't know that information. But then also concerning can be, what if what you thought to be true about money turned out not to be true? When would you want to find out about that? And so we just see all types of situations where this is happening. As it relates to benefits, one of the ones, for example, contractual wealth versus statement wealth versus other types of wealth. So diving into, say, contractual wealth. Contractual wealth is a contract between you and someone else whereby you're looking to often transfer risk. There's a certain set of parameters or guarantees in a contract. So what we're doing is we're giving our money to someone else, and then they give you back a contract with guarantees. Now, if you've done this properly, you have transferred the risk from you to someone else. But if you've not done it properly, you think you have transferred the risk, but you may not have fully transferred the risk. And it's critical to understand this concept and the contract of contractual wealth. So as it relates to benefits, the big thing you want to write down is to get a copy of a summary plan description, because this is often where you can kind of quote unquote read the contract. So diving in a little deeper, as someone looks at, say, protection and protecting the things that they've worked hard for, protecting their assets or their income or their life, contractual wealth is often utilized in an attempt to transfer this risk. And in each of these elements here that we see, there's going to be a range from either 0, hey, I've got no contractual wealth, up to the maximum. And the maximum oftentimes when you're talking about contractual wealth would be replacement costs. So it'd be, if I have a house worth $500,000, I'd want the replacement cost if that burnt down, that it'd be replaced. So somewhere between zero and replacement. Speaking of vehicle and liability insurance here, this is a huge one where oftentimes unknowingly people are extremely exposed. Now I know we're talking about benefits today, but I have seen in people's benefit booklets where they can go select vehicle or discounts on auto insurance or homeowners insurance by going through, let's say, relationships that have been developed through work. But oftentimes people have no idea their level of exposure, and sitting in a courtroom after you or your spouse has accidentally rear-ended someone is not the time to find out how your insurance works in an at-fault accident. We just see situations where people are being very inefficient too. Like, for example, in this vehicle and property, we've looked at where people want to have maximum protection, but also minimum cost. And we've evaluated where people made a decision at one point in their auto insurance or their vehicle, but now they're further along in life. And we see how, I had a client a while back here where for a portion of the cost they were already paying, less than they were currently paying on their coverage, I think it was like 2/3 of the cost, they were able to get multiple times of coverage. I think it was something even like 10 times of coverage. But the moral of the story is we want to have maximum protection and minimum costs and know what are we really doing to transfer that risk. Okay, we've got a lot of questions here that we're not going to have time to go through all of them. If you notice there, that toolkit, if you email Amber toolkit in the subject line, we can get out these questions to you to ask your team and your professionals. I'm going to use disability as an example for today, though, to dive a little deeper in continuous. The language, because disability is something that oftentimes, at work, people will see short-term disability, long-term disability, offered through work. Maybe you have employer paid, maybe you can pick some on your own. Kind of hard to know. This is an example where the language in the contract and thereby the risk transfer can really vary. We see people either that don't know or don't understand the definition of disability, or really just how the contract works. They think, okay, I've got disability through work, I'm covered. And I'll kind of get into short-term disability a little bit later, but using long-term disability as an example. The definition of disability can range from what's called an any occupation definition that says that in order for the risk transfer to qualify as disabled means that you have to have an inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity. Versus the other end of the spectrum is what's called a true own occupation definition. What that means is that if someone is considered disabled, if they're unable to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation. And often sometimes too, the benefits don't change even if you're making income and gainfully employed in another occupation. So there's a huge difference here between an any occupation and an own occupation in terms of a level of protection and risk transfer. But oftentimes people say, I got disability, I'm good. Well, if they say, hey, you can't do your job, even if you're working another job, versus, hey, you could do some other job. Again, the time to find that out is not when you're disabled. Other things to note are that sometimes the definition of disability changes after a period of time. Sometimes we see 24 months where someone says, oh, hey, I'm great, I'm covered, I got an any-oc definition, or excuse me, an own occupation definition, but that may only hold true for 12 months. Again, not good or bad, we're just trying to understand what's happening here. You might see there's limitations for mental or nervous conditions. Sometimes the benefits only factor in a base pay and not, say, commissions or bonuses. And sometimes there's a cap on payouts or benefit amounts. So again, we really want to have you understand for yourself. Often that's that summary plan description form where you can then read through and understand the contract. So this has been a huge one. I see time and time again. All right. Continuing along, we often see that people understand how statement wealth works different than contractual wealth. So for example, let's go back to the pension conversation. Pension's a pension, right? What most people have today is a defined contribution plan, a contribution pension plan, the 401k, the 403b, those types of things. Those are what's called statement wealth. You or your employer give your money to someone else, and get into the why, the how much, etc. But you put your money somewhere else and you get back a statement. For example, a 401k statement. Now, statement wealth can be very, very powerful, but with statement wealth, you do maintain the risk. Again, we just want to understand what's going on. A defined benefit pension plan operates around the contractual arrangement, where the risk is transferred to someone else to manage that risk. Again, we'll talk more about this but why does this matter? Well, let's use an example related to benefits. We were working with someone, they were looking at retiring at the end of the year. They hadn't decided about if they were going to retire or not, but they were considering it. They felt they had it all worked out. They mentioned, hey, we've got some pension options at work to look through. So we said, looking into this further, we wanted to kind of dissect what their choices were. And there was some language around what's called vesting. On that vesting meant it's how much they're entitled to of the compensation. So in looking at their situation, it looked at if they retired at the end of the year, they would only get about 40% of the lump sum they were anticipating. So let's say if someone was anticipating 100,000, it was going to be 40,000. So the balance that they were looking at, say for example, that 100,000 on their accounts included the employer match, that if they had chosen to retire at the end of that year, they would not have received those amounts on the employer matching side due to the vesting rules. If they did stay one more year, which again, they were open to looking at, they would receive the full vesting, but something much more significant happens at that point. Because in that, the formula changes. Instead of going and receiving the defined contribution lump sum amount, which would have been kind of like that 401k balance along those lines, instead, if they receive that one more year, they would pivot to having the ability to have that contractual wealth option of the defined benefit. So when we looked at those two parameters and we looked at them for income purposes, and again, we don't have time to go into all the details today, but in this person's situation, it translated to, if they stuck around one more year to have the defined benefit option, it translated to 14 times more income over 20 years if they were to live that long. Now, we did not make that decision for our clients, what to do, retire, not to do. That's not our job. Our job is to be educators to help empower you in the choices and the decisions you're making. At the end of the day, it's all your money, your time, and your life. But I think that they appreciated having that full disclosure as they went to evaluate those options. So if you hear something like we have pension options at work, it could mean a variety of things. Is it a defined benefit or a defined contribution? Especially when it comes to income purposes, this can be wildly different, but there's just questions you want to ask. If it's a defined benefit plan, you might want to know, how long will it last? Could it go down in value? Is there a cost of living adjustment? What is the vesting schedule? Again, these are all questions that we've put together in that toolkit for you, that if you send an email to Amber and just put toolkit, we'll be glad to send those to you, that you can reference these and have these as you sit down with your benefits booklet and your team. Okay, so mistake number one was the not always having the proper understanding or misunderstanding. So number two is we want to get into products versus strategies. Obviously, we want to have the right equipment and products. We want to have the right benefit elections, right? So to speak. And elections are the things that and products are the things you buy or don't buy. Whereas strategies are going to be the things that you believe or you do with those tools. So most financial problems boil down to a money problem. The problem of potentially not having enough money at the right time with the right ability to access it. I'm going to use long-term care as an example, because again, in reviewing benefit options that people have, sometimes they say, hey, you can select a long-term care option or long-term care insurance through benefits at work. I got a call from a client. My client had referred someone to me because unfortunately this person's lost a parent. Their other parent was going through Alzheimer's and dementia, and fortunately did have a long-term care insurance policy that was really helping this parent in this situation. And so then this referral called me up and said, hey, can I buy a long-term care insurance policy? And I said, I mean, sure, you can buy a long-term care insurance policy, but long-term care is not a product problem. It's a money problem. It's saying, how can we have strategies that should a long-term care event occur, you're prepared, AKA you have money at the right time and in the right way to access it, and you're able to adapt to that change. Yet, if it doesn't occur, we don't want you or your family to have spent money on insurance premiums that didn't need to be spent. So again, it's what is the strategies and options. Now, long-term care insurance might be one of those choices, and it still may be an option someone selects, but it's just not, hey, I have a long-term care problem, I need to go buy long-term care insurance, or I want to retire, so I'm going to go buy a retirement plan. It's more about strategies to how do we accomplish this. So we see mistakes. These are items related to benefits that would apply to that products versus strategy conversation. Now, not saying that these are good or bad or whatever, we want to understand there's more context, and there are questions to ask to see about how these below products may or may not work in your situation or part of your strategy. What we like to do is to start with the why of what you're trying to accomplish, and then work down to strategies, and products are kind of the last thing. I mean, conversely, just to give another example of this product versus strategy planning, is the, let's say 529, or if someone said that they wanted to help pay for their kids to go to school. So you said, hey, if I want to do college funding, I'll go buy some product. And if you follow that line of thinking, you'll probably end up with a 529 college savings account or something similar. However, that's not the only option. Sometimes as people evaluate strategies, they may say, well, wait, what if I were to acquire an investment property, and then that property, and I put money into there, and it could grow over time? That potentially could give me investment income. It could give me a different set of tax write-offs that may not be available in, say, a 529. I may use that investment property during the accumulation period, but then when my child gets to college, if they get to college, if they still want to go to college, if I still want to support it, perhaps we sell the property, perhaps we do a refinance, perhaps we do a 1035 and move it to the location where the kid's going to go to college, and we can, instead of paying rent to someone else, we can recover that. Maybe we have their roommates help pay rent there. It's just, we want to be thinking about strategies and options, not just products. And in benefits, also often you're just going down the benefits line and you check. So we just want to be thinking about how can we use the same type of utility of money and apply it to financial goals. Next one. Mistakes 3 we see is either losing money or not getting as much as you could. When it comes to losing money, that's typically when someone doesn't fully understand how something has like a use it or lose it provision or limited carryover. This could be things like a flexible spending account, paid time off at work, vacation pay, holiday pay, sabbaticals. Sometimes they'll offer that through work as an option that if you don't take advantage of, it's just gone. Also, how you get paid can vary, meaning sometimes you can be doing the same work, but if you do that same work at a certain time of the year, there's other bonuses or incentives or profit. So you just want to be mindful of how does the compensation work where you're at? What benefits are you perhaps maybe not taking advantage of? For example, we see things like a company match or a contribution, where maybe there's a place where someone has to work a year before they can qualify for the 401k match, but then they don't think to then add that match on later, a year later. Professional development and tuition reimbursement. This can be substantial. You see where There's trainings or certifications, continuing educations. There's scholarships funds I've seen where companies offer to pay for someone to teach in the local community, to be a student in the local community. I knew a gentleman who did not finish college kind of the first time through, but then was able to complete his degree thanks to the tuition reimbursement program through his workplace. And that ended up being thousands of dollars. Community engagement and giving. This could be both time and money. I've seen situations where people are paid to volunteer at a nonprofit, or where a company will match charitable contributions that employees do. So lifestyle incentives, there's wellness classes on demand, or exercise class fees, health club reimbursement. So there's just a lot of things. It's just so much money goes unclaimed. Again, we don't have time to go through all that in our presentation today, but I would encourage you to sign up for the toolkit to help you be mindful and aware of some of these things, so you can have that tool and you can reference it. Another area for opportunities is related to just kind of discounts and efficiency. Telemedicine and telehealth can be a pretty big one here too, where you can still access good quality medical care, but in a potentially more cost-effective manner. If you have prescriptions that you're on, there's often mail order programs, there's websites or prescription discounts that you can use if you go through your employer. I mean, I've even seen things through work where people can get discounts on tires or cell phone service. This is an interesting one from a previous place here, is that, let's say someone's paying $100 a month on a cell phone plan, and they're able to save 15% of that each month. You know, that can add up. You'd be surprised how many of these offerings are out there that people just don't take advantage of. There was a previous company affiliation that I had where the cell phone plan, you could get a 17% discount by being a part of, by letting the cell phone carrier know where you worked. So you might not know about that. There's travel assistance and all kinds of different things. So I would just, again, encourage you, we don't have the time to go through all of them today, but people are leaving opportunities out there on the table. Mistake number 4 is forms. This is a huge issue. I'll bet that for some of you listening on the call today, you do not know who your beneficiaries are. And a quick story is, there was someone was in an advisor's office, and he had been married. It was on a second marriage. And the advisor said, yeah, who's the beneficiary on your 401k plan? And the client says, well, my wife. Well, is that your current wife or your ex-wife? Client says, I don't know, but the company would know. And the advisor looked at who the custodian was and was like, I'm not sure they would know. And they ended up calling in there, and they said, we don't know, we can find out. We'll send a letter out in a couple days. And, you know, in those situations, sometimes you don't have a couple days. You just want to get it done right now. So just get the form and update the beneficiaries, because I would like to talk to you about a historic Supreme Court case, which relates to this, which is critically important. So the William Kennedy case, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was a gentleman named William Kennedy, who he passed away, and he had a large qualified plan. And when he went through the divorce, he wasn't talking to his ex-wife. He wanted to leave all the money to his daughter. And so, you know, in his will and in his trust, he wrote, you know, his daughter gets the money. Just one problem. The beneficiary form on this 401k at work, the qualified plan, said his ex-wife was listed. So he dies, his ex-wife shows up, she wants the money. The daughter shows up, she wants the money. This gets kicked all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, do you think the Supreme Court really wants to spend their time on a beneficiary argument? Well, when there's 78 million baby boomers, they might run across this a time or two. And so ultimately they evaluated and they ruled 9-0 unanimously in favor of who? Ex-wife or the daughter? It was the ex-wife. They said that the beneficiary form supersedes all. So whenever you have a beneficiary designation, so at work, this could be, it could be old life insurance policies, it could be older new annuities, it could be bank IRAs, group life through employers. All these things have beneficiary forms on them. And if you don't check them, whatever it is gets it. And the worst thing that can happen is that you could go to someone who's passed away from another state with the highest tax bracket you could have. So you just want to be mindful of these. I would encourage you to have your benefits updated. And then the other thing that's interesting is I had a situation where there was a woman who found out that she was 100% survivor beneficiary on her husband's defined benefit pension program through his work. And he selected her to be 100%. So when he passed away, she received 100% of those proceeds, even though they weren't married anymore. They hadn't been married for years. It was a nice surprise to find in the mail, so much so that she ended up retiring. So there's lots of forms around this topic. The other thing too, around just the topic of incorrect forms would be tax withholdings and having too much or too little. If you don't have enough withheld, it could be problematic from a penalty standpoint. If you're holding too much back, maybe there's some lost money in motion. But again, we just see mistakes with incorrect forms. All right. It could fly away. Your money could fly away just like that. So government benefits. I know this wouldn't be as much related to benefits through work, but it's still somewhat related in terms of employer credits and things like that. So we're just going to touch on this briefly. With respect to Social Security, ssa.gov is where you want to go to register. We could do a whole presentation around Social Security, but for today's purposes, what we're going to mention is you need to have at least 40 working credits to qualify for Social Security benefits. So in 2021, you could receive 1 credit for each $1,470 of earnings, up to a maximum of 4 credits per year. So 40 credits would be approximately 10 years of work. The reason for that is to make the eligibility for Social Security. So the Social Security Administration will calculate your base Social Security based off your average indexed monthly earnings during the 35 years in which you earned the most. It's only the years that you paid into Social Security. There's complaints every year. For example, there's over 92,000 complaints just in 2016. So the moral of the story is you want to be paying attention to your Social Security statement. You can go on to ssa.gov to find out about it. If you find an error, you have 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days to fix it. Why it's that? Who knows? If you're divorced, your ex-spouse or you could still potentially receive benefits from an ex-spouse. We just want to look into that. So if you've been married at least 10 years or longer, if you were married to a spouse for at least 10 years or longer, you could be eligible for potentially some of their benefits. So again, want to look into that. Also identity theft. The reason we bring up Social Security and the benefits conversation today is just, again, we don't want to have incorrect forms. We don't want to make mistakes. We want to have you entitled to money that you've worked hard for, or that should or potentially could be coming your way. All right, let's wrap up here with mistake number 5, which is lack of context.
Hey, Brian.
Yo.
A question coming in through Slido I thought you might want to address.
Who do I talk to about changing my beneficiaries, checking or changing my beneficiaries? So typically that's going to be your benefits department. Your benefits department would typically be the person that you would talk to about that. Each institution is going to have their own beneficiary forms oftentimes. And so let's say I have a old 401k at an old employer. I'd want to reach out to that old employer and say, hey, I'm trying to check on my beneficiaries where I used to work. Can you send me an updated beneficiary form? And even quite frankly, what I would do is just get the beneficiary form and update it, as opposed to, I mean, you could check who it is, but you would just want it to be who you want it to be, plain and simple. So typically you would find that with your benefits department at wherever the employer was, or the financial institution. And if you're struggling with that, or you don't know really anything, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can help you try and find that. So thanks, Nate. This last, it's just interesting. People are doing the best they can. Often people don't have what I refer to as a macro manager. They don't have someone looking at the big picture. They don't have an objective tool of verification they're looking at to make decisions. They're not looking at decisions through all phases of wealth. They're just making decisions one at a time with different people at different times under different circumstances. And again, it's not anyone's fault, but as I bring up something like, would you make this following arrangement? And I'll kind of get the thing here so it's not blocking it too much. But if I came to you and I said, look, why don't you give me your money? Just keep giving your money to me every time you get paid. I'll go ahead and I'll hold on to it for you. Don't pay me. I'm not going to tax you on it now. I'll tax you later. Listen, I make all the rules. I can change the rules at any time by the stroke of a pen. If I want to increase your tax, I can. If I want to assess a penalty, I can. And then when you come to me to get your money later, I'm going to tell you at what age you can take it without penalty, how much you can take, and how much you need to take out, and how much I'm going to keep. Would you want to do that with me? The funny thing is if anyone guesses what I just described to you, it sounds a lot like the rules of financial institutions, right? It's interesting because where I grew up, the tallest building, financial institution. Moved to another city, tallest building, financial institution. It's interesting because if you look at that and you go back to 1978 and you go this qualified deferred compensation plan, this 401k plan, where they said, hey, and you go to the rules of financial institutions, we want your money, put it in the 401k. We want it systematically, contribute every single paycheck, hold on to it for as long as possible. For example, you might have the ability to access it prior to 59.5 without penalty, and then return it little by little. We're just going to give you required minimum distributions. Then if you die with that money in the 401k, the government would be more than happy to get involved with how that's handled. In fact, there was just legislation related to it within the last couple of years. So the moral of the story is oftentimes without proper context or understanding, you go, there's no way I would do this in arrangement, but yet that's the first thing people sign up for. Again, I'm not saying that these are good or bad. Contributing to traditional 401k is a tax deferral, not a tax deduction. You're just deferring tax in the future. Maybe that is what you want to do. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. Each situation is unique. Again, we're not giving specific advice here, but you just want to be thinking about it. We want to think about strategies of where do we fall in an effective tax rate compared to history. If we're going to do a deferral, we want to be able to have the ability to control our tax rate later if possible. We want to look for options, maybe if we're looking at a tax deferral, where could it be maybe tax-free or maybe capital gains treatment and a step up on basis at death. So the moral of the story is, again, we want to have strategies here where maybe we do a tax deferral through a 401k and we say, hey, we're going to put our contributions on the after-tax side. We'll put the employer contributions on the pre-tax side. We're going to contribute up to the match, but not more. Again, we're not saying what to do or not to do. It's just that people develop strategies. Hopefully, we want to look at the splash and then the ripple. We want to understand our options all the way through. Another one is this going back to the products versus strategies. And the lack of context here with mistake number 5 is that we just see oftentimes like kind of the tail wagging the dog is that people go, oh, what should I buy? You know, we'll hear it. Should I get crypto? Should I buy life insurance? Should I get an investment? Should I buy whatever it might be? Should I get REIT? Should I get real estate? Is now a good time to get gold? Whatever. Products or things that buy are not the answer. It'd be like saying, hey, I want to be good at golf, so I should just go buy the best golf clubs. Depending upon where you go for advice and where people get their education from, though, is people do have their own beliefs and innate biases towards or away from certain products. And the products are not innately good or bad. They're just tools until someone decides how and where to use them. So I'm just going to give another example. This would be related to benefits, where sometimes we see the kind of the tax tail wagging the dog, so to speak. And it would be related to a 457 deferred compensation option. And so the idea is to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and do a deferred comp plan. We're not going to take as much money now. We'll receive it later. Hopefully we'll be in a lower tax bracket. If I take it now, I might lose that money to taxes. Hey, if I take it later, I'll be able to keep it. Seems easy enough. But in doing so, you're also deferring use and control of that money, potentially enjoyment of that money. You've given up the control. And for some people, having money out of their control is a great thing. It is very, very important for people to get that money out and to defer it. For another person, they could be inadvertently locking themselves out of the use and the enjoyment of that wealth. And we just need to understand that oftentimes the mainstream education we receive is for the masses. Well, a lot of the clients we work with aren't like the masses, nor really do they want to be. I want to illustrate further this acceleration and utility of money and the multi-use money, and just give a quick example of it. And so, and just for a quick aside, I noticed my notes here, I wrote down, I know from personal experiences that there are not always tomorrows. There are not, the kids are only young once. So sometimes this whole defer, defer, defer. I mean, I've seen a situation where someone is maxing out their 401k. They're trying to participate at the highest level of the employee stock purchase plan. And they go, oh, maybe I should defer compensation. Maybe also they're funding a 529, which yet in doing all of these things, they feel really, really great about it. But then the result of that could be that they don't have enough liquidity on hand, that then when life happens, or that there is a lifestyle that they want to maintain, that they end up either utilizing inefficient debt or being locked out of the ability to act on those opportunities, and thus don't get that rental property or vacation house, because despite the fact that they earn good money, where and how it is positioned, they have inadvertently locked out of the access to that, because they go, well, I can't use that for a penalty, or this is locked up for this, and let's lock for that, and I'd love to go do this, but I just can't. Again, this is not saying that people don't enjoy, their 401k and hanging out with their 401k statement on the weekend and looking at the balance. It's just different though when I get a call from a client enjoying their weekend, living in a property they acquired and enjoying their real property wealth. So anyway, wrapping up here, I'm looking at the time. It's just, again, just context. Restricted stock units, this is another example. We see it where stock is granted to an employee. Once it's vested, there's no additional tax benefits. So sometimes at that point, RSUs are going to be similar to your salary. Again, it's not to say that you should just sell your RSUs once they vest, but how do we think about them? If I've been granted cash instead of stock, would I still buy the same stock in the same amount? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. But we just want to understand the characteristics of these employee benefits and things we have an opportunity to participate in, the employee stock purchase plan. Maybe this is a good choice, maybe it's not. We want to look and see, what is your strategy around that? I'm just peeking at the time here. I might not go through this in detail. You can go to the benefits toolkit, but the idea here is sometimes on the strategy versus the product is it's not just getting the stock for a discount, but I've seen people and benefit options where people can do a quick sale on a stock purchase plan, where they might buy the stock, but then they might reposition that to be used for something else and keep that money moving in their personal economy, as opposed to accumulating and compounding, kind of putting in a piggy bank for somewhere later. So in general, we just want to be, what is your strategy around this? How much? What's the right amount? So kind of wrapping up here, every gimme has a gotcha. Any tool we are looking to use, just go through all this real quick and get this up here. Any tool we're going to use, we want to just look through phases of wealth. One tool may work well in the accumulation phase, but then we need to have proper expectations for how we're going to get it out in the distribution phase. Because in all fairness, saving money is really just future consumption. Either you're going to consume it or someone else will. And when we consume it later, the market's either going to be up or down, taxes may be up or down, interest rates may be up or down. We don't know what that future is going to be. We just know it's going to be different. And thus we want to be really strategic about the decisions we make, such that we're able to adapt to change. So it would make sense that the majority of the conversations related to the benefits and work is going to be in this accumulation phase. But it would be a critical mistake if you're not mindful of the other phases while you're making these accumulation choices. If you need ropes to get down the mountain, you need to talk about them now. You can't just make a benefit decision in the accumulation phase without understanding how it plays out in those ripples over time. So we work with people. We help them through that. We want to help understand and look at strategies through all the phases of wealth and ultimately what's important to you. So wrapping up here, in summary, we went through from a historical context why 1978 matters to your choices today. And really that's the shift went from someone else is going to take care of it to you got to figure it out. it's all good. We just need to be that much more mindful as consumers to empower ourselves with those choices. We talked about mistakes to avoid, either perception and misunderstanding, product versus strategy planning, leaving money on the table, incorrect forms, and lack of context. And then as far as the questions to ask the benefits team and your advisors, we addressed some of those today, but then I would encourage you to get that toolkit to then have that as you go meet with your team as we go. So in closing, where do we go from here? I mentioned the toolkit plenty of times on the questions to ask. Secondly, let us know if we can help. You know, it's okay to ask questions. You may already have a team of people you work with. That's okay. There's not a charge for an initial consultation. When you visit with us, if you want to come in and visit, we don't do business on a first meeting. We can sit down and share some of the ideas and discuss what we do and how that could be benefit to you. We can do an online meeting. We've got our office here in Wilsonville. We'd be happy to come see you. We just like to get you to know your story and how we can be a resource to you. But flipping over here, this is the last little part here is upcoming events and past recordings. And then I could see if there's any other questions. So it looks like it's wrapped up here. I'm at the end of time. So Nate, I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll give another minute or two here, and then looks like we're about at time.
Looks like you answered what came in. Great job.
Cool. All right, y'all. Thanks for coming. Cheers, and appreciate your time.